Why do we bother to come to a meeting like this in the first place? Why should we spend our time leaving our homes and getting in an automobile and driving here to have a discussion, to hear a talk? Something brought you here tonight. Have you ever considered that fact alone, that something brought you here because you wanted something? But I want to express that feeling in a very special way at the very start. And let me tell you, it's no fun to be suppressed. It's no fun to feel pressed down by life. It's no fun, ladies and gentlemen, doing what you did all day today, which was to be scared. So you've come to the right place. You've come to a place tonight where you will hear the answers, the solutions, in very simple and clear words, the answers to your problems of feeling isolated from life. A feeling that you are a victim, which you are because you have never investigated the situation. Of course you're a victim. Of course you're pressed down. This is the way it's been all your life, and you've never challenged it. No wonder nothing changes. How do you ever expect anything to be different as long as you accept life as it is? As long as you enjoy feeling victimized. As long as one of the greatest destructive pleasures of your life is to complain and crab and revolt, and you do it all in vain. And ladies and gentlemen, every single one of you, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're doing against your own life, against your own spirit. Maybe we'd better start with some elementary principles tonight. Do you know that every time you're angry, every time you're irritable, that you have hit yourself spiritually? You wouldn't permit anyone else to treat you the way you treat yourself. And what we're going to do tonight is find out why we endure self-laceration, why we permit ourselves to hit ourselves all day long. Let me tell you right now, one reason you do it. Let's not waste a second tonight. There's so much to do. Now listen to this very strange fact at the very start. One reason you lash at yourself, one reason you give blows to yourself is because then you can cry. And then you can cry and say, what a vicious, cruel world. How did I get put into this terrible place? With broken human relationships. And taxes always going up. No one seems to care. No one seems to have any sense at all in this world. And in that description, you are absolutely right. Where did you ever get the notion that anyone cared about you? Where did you ever get the idea that you know someone who is sane, who can behave sanely and decently and rightly toward you? Whatever your age is, I know what you've been doing. I know what you've been doing with your life. You've been looking around, haven't you? You ladies, you've been looking around for a man who is strong, a man who can take care of you, which is not wrong in itself. You men, you've been looking around. What are you looking around for? Some political leader? Some religious charlatan? Some group, some society, some idea, some philosophy? You're looking around for someone to support you, for someone to tell you what to do. You're looking around for someone who's not scared so that you can feel safe with him or her or it, and it has never happened, has it? You're seated here tonight just as lost as you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, aren't you? This is the situation. And I came here tonight. I'll tell you why I came here tonight. I came here to tell you that you don't have to endure anymore if, listen carefully, or you're going to make a big mistake again. You don't have to endure it if you don't want to. If you go out of this hall tonight and you go right back to your pains and your confusions, and you go back to your hostilities, which you're loaded with, and you go back to your angers, it is because you have made the choice to do that. On the other hand, if you sit here tonight and you listen and you absorb, and something begins to speak to you and you begin to say, you know, the description that man gave of me is absolutely right. I don't know how he knew so much about me, but he sure described it perfectly. And I would like to investigate everything that was said to see if it applies to me. I am telling you that it does. I am telling you that any man or any woman in this room who wants to learn, listen, who wants to learn how to love truth more than falsehood, to love light more than darkness, any one of you who wants to become a student can do so, and I will guarantee you that you will change. And I will guarantee you that you will look at yourself someday in a new way, and you will say, how could I have been so foolish? How could I have been so idiotic to think that suffering and agony and fear has value? And if you are enduring those features, that is exactly what you're doing. Wake up and listen to what I am telling you. If you're afraid, which you are, if you're angry, which you are, it is incredible that any human being would say, that is good. Don't you dare tell me that you think that anger is bad. You are saying that even the feeling of desolation, of isolation, you are saying that that is good. Let's find out why. What kind of a human being would say that it is a good thing to be cast away on the isolated island, cut off from life, alone, lonely, scared, incapable, not knowing the way out? Well, let me tell you what kind of a human being would do that. First, let me tell you that there are just about 4 billion of them on Earth, because that's the present population of Earth, about 4 billion people. Now, what kind of a person would make that dreadful mistake? One, it's a man or a woman who has accepted his life as it presently is as permanent. It is a person who has so fallen in love with the living as a castaway on the island, with all his screams and all his worries. He has taken that as necessary and has so fallen in love with it that he says, here is where I'm going to stay for the rest of my life. I'd better tell you something right now so there's no mistake of what we're getting at. The vast majority of human beings, almost all 4 billion of them, are absolutely insane. Now look, don't miss this. The fact that any human being is insane, insanity being alienated from sanity, apart from God, truth, reality, the fact that any human being finds himself in this isolation is not the problem at all. We are here tonight talking about these things, going over them, looking at them very carefully, because that is not the problem to be a castaway. That's not it at all. You are a castaway and you know it. Don't kid me. I know how you behave today, every one of you. I know how terrified you are of living with yourself, and you know it too, don't you? Now let me tell you what the real problem is. An individual becomes so fond, so in love with his wrong states, his negativities, that he becomes, if you can believe it, comfortable in them. You try to get through to a hardened human being about the light, about the truth, about the ability to be rescued from the desert island. You try to get through to him and he will fight you. He will snarl at you. He will sneer at you. He will say, "Who are you trying to tell me that I'm not in heaven?" Here he is barely making it on that island all alone, isolated. And in his insanity, he says to God, he says to truth, he says, "What are you trying to do to me? What are you doing taking away my life? Don't touch me. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. I assure you, truth will do exactly that." No human being is ever isolated, alone, afraid of the future, for example, which you all are. No human being has ever been left alone except he, she asked for it. Now we have to find out why anyone would be that foolish, why anyone would fight rescue back to a higher kind of civilization, not the society that we live in. Why would anyone fight? Listen and see if you can make a long leap into what I'm going to explain to you. It's because he doesn't know anything higher than the famine, than the loneliness, than the looking around for a rescue ship. He doesn't know anything higher than that. Not knowing anything higher than that, he says, this is it. This is all there is. Every lost person insists in his own mind that the only thing there is for him is to be lost. And that lostness becomes very familiar. And he refuses. Most human beings refuse angrily and fiercely to come to a talk like this, listen to the truth, for fear that they're going to lose their life. Now go real slow, please, and try to absorb. Understand, a human being is offered, the rescue ship comes along to the deserted island, and there's the captain yelling out, "Swim out and we'll pick you up and take you back home to your homeland." And the castaway looks up and he shouts defiance and anger at the captain and tells him to go away. Don't take away the only life I have. Of course it's the only life he has. Of course it's the only life you have. I am telling you, that if you will have the courage, just a little bit at a time, to take one step off of that island, that miserable island, that life you now live. Come on, admit it. Look, start right tonight to be honest, maybe for the first time in your life. Admit how wretched it is, how you hate people you claim to love. Don't be afraid to see what you're like. That is not the problem. The problem is that you want to remain an egotist. You want to remain as you are so that you can say, at least this is my life. The human mind, your mind as it presently operates, cannot understand what it means to get off the island, to swim out to the rescue boat and get in it and swim away to another land. Now, that other land we can describe with words, and we're not going too far into it because you wouldn't understand it. It's called being free of yourself. It's called being free of the past. It's called living a sane, decent, good life. It is called not being afraid of anything anymore. Anything. Not of life, not of death, not of having only 5 cents in your pocket, not being afraid of psychopathic leaders in this world, not being afraid of the pressures that sickies put on other sickies. I said not being afraid of anything. Now, you don't know that state, so it doesn't communicate much to you when I describe it with words. Nevertheless, I've given you a hint of it. Something far better can be done than words, communicating in the English language. I'll tell you what it is. Here's where you come in. I've described your life accurately, haven't I? You're suppressed, you're lost, you're miserable, and you have great hostility toward the captain who wants to rescue you. But I should tell you that it's unconscious. If you deny it, it's because you don't see it, not because it isn't there. And the very fact, this is not so much right now, but later on you'll get thinking about these things and you'll resist them perhaps. You see, when we don't see a resistance in us, when we don't see a hostility, we automatically deny it, don't we? We say, well, I'm not angry toward truth. You say, oh, I go to church all the time, or I'm spiritually inclined. I want these things. Can you be honest and see how you resist, how you do have hostility towards something that's trying to change you? Look, let's see how you react to this. I'll speak personally. All right, for a minute. I understand every single one of you in this room, 100%, your psychology, that is. I know how you have to react to what you're hearing tonight, because I know the old nature. I know how it doesn't want to hear these things. This is the last thing that it wants to hear, because it fears destruction. Don't take away my miserable island. Now, I said a minute ago that you have to do some work yourself, and here's what you have to do. The captain on that rescue ship, a couple hundred yards offshore from that island, the captain is calling you all the time. He's got the megaphone or whatever you call it, and he's talking out to the person on the island. He says, come on, leave where you are and come on up to the ship. We'll take you back where there'll be no more want. There'll be no more heartache. There'll be no loneliness. Ladies and gentlemen, I am talking about you experience heaven on earth. I'm talking about you being free in the here and now in this physical life. I'm not talking about some charlatan-built future heaven which billions of people want to believe in so they won't have to face the hell that they live in now. We're facing the hell in order to create a real heaven, which is the absence of hell. Hell being your nature as it now exists and operates, right? And you know that's right. And I know it too. The captain calls truth. Want to call it God? That's fine. The captain calls and he says, sir or madam, you with all your tears, which you're so much in love with, and all your complaints and all your self-pity and all your sickness and all your egotism, please, sir or madam, there on that deserted island, I am not trying to hurt you. I am not trying to take anything away from you. And the captain's very wise. He knows that the castaway is looking up scared, and he looks back at all the miseries he's had, and he says, oh, how can I leave my misery? They're the only friends I have. What will I do with myself if I don't have my agonies? If I don't have my neurosis? What will I do with myself? You're thinking this right now. Right now, as I've been talking to you, you have been thinking this. Let's see if you can become aware of it. That would be marvelous. So the captain's very patient. Certain isolated, lost human beings finally get 1 ounce of sense. And that's all it takes at the start. That's all you can have at the start. You have no intelligence at all. Is it intelligent to suffer? Is it intelligent to live in hatred and calling it love? That's insanity. A certain number of human beings begin to get 1 ounce of sense. They begin to see how they've defeated themselves through their lying. Lies, 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 pain, 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 pain. They always go together. A few human beings look inside themselves and they say, anything is better than enduring another week of this. Anything is better than continuing to live with my sickness. I'll find out. I'll let the captain prove to me personally whether he knows what he's talking about or not. That's all right. You can't accept it. You don't know what it's like. So you have to say, I'll find out. I'll find out if he's telling the truth or not. That's fine, great. Truth says fine. Prove me anytime you want. You find out that truth is telling the truth. So the individual takes one little step out into the water. He leaves the dry, dusty island. Takes 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. And he's always afraid that something bad is going to happen to him as he takes 10 steps out into the water heading for the ship. He's always afraid that something terrible is going to happen. And lo and behold, as he takes 10 steps, 12, and the water gets a little deeper, but he gets closer to the ship, lo and behold, he finds out that the exact opposite of what his sick mind lied to him about, the exact opposite of what he expected happened. What happened is that he begins to become very clear in his mind of how lost he really was and how he did indeed lie about everything. You see, our old sick nature operates through lies, prevarication. He finds out how sick he really was, which is the beginning of sanity, of real health. He sees how bad off he really was, and lo and behold again, it doesn't bother him as he thought it would. And let me tell you why. This is all very complex and has to be gone over and over many times. But what is happening is that he's no longer identifying with his old sick nature. He used to think that he was sick and he liked to be sick so he could hang on to that as an identity. When you hang on to yourself as a sick human being, you have a marvelous destructive excuse for lashing out, for feeling sorry for yourself, all of which continues to build a false sense of self, which is lifelessness. By the way, you're heading toward true life as you listen and gather these points. Continue with our man on the island. He finds out one thing, how bad off he was, and he sees that to even feel ashamed of where he used to be was wrong, because that recreates time, a time self. And all human beings who are lost live in a time self, not in an eternal self. He then also finds out that as he gets closer to the ship, and closer to rescue, and finally climbs on it altogether, he finds out that there is a world a destination, an existence which the intellect could never picture, could never understand, and the intellect could never want. The last thing, you listen to this, the last thing your misguided mind wants is this other world. And I'll tell you why. Because it would lose its hold on your life as it presently has. We could go into some very scary things on that. I won't do that tonight. Those of you who continue to come and perhaps come to our classes, we can go into it. And we'll talk about dark spirits. And we'll talk about how they take human beings over. And how they have no place to live but in your mind and in your life with your permission. And we'll show you how to withdraw that permission. But the man gets closer to the boat and he finally gets on. And you know, when you get on a boat, now please don't take what I'm going to say as religious jargon, as philosophy. I'm going to describe to you the kind of a life you can have. When you get on that boat, you're not in charge. You were in charge on that wretched island, and look what a mess you made of it. When you get on that boat, something else is in charge. Someone else is in charge. We called the captain, didn't we? Someone's in charge of that boat so that you can be a passenger. And you don't have to know how to guide the boat because the captain knows. What I'm saying is, in very brief coverage of this, you wouldn't have to figure out your own life anymore. You're doing pretty badly at it now, aren't you? Because you're using your intellect based on desire, based on the wish to build your false sense of self instead of getting rid of it. When you get on that boat, do you know that your life will be completely effortless? You won't have to make decisions at all except for rye bread or whole wheat bread down at the grocery market. That's based on personal choice, and that's just fine. You won't have to make decisions regarding your inner life, yourself, because there will be no personal, egotistical, self-centered, destructive self there to think about. Wouldn't you like that? There's something in you that doesn't want it at all. I know that. Truth is smarter than falsehood. There's no comparison. Truth has all power. Therefore, the very resistance that you have to leaving the island, that is beginning to change yourself, the resistance that you have no chance at all. If you yield yourself to reality and say, please, do for me what I can't do for myself. I tried everything. I've tried all those love affairs, and I've tried all those business involvements, and I've tried all those TV entertainment programs, and I've tried all that traveling, and I've tried everything, inside and outside, and I'm still scared. See, the beauty of this is that you don't have to figure out your life anymore because you see that you never really had a life of your own at all. You had something that was invented, that was created out of imagination, out of thought, out of desire. And when you see this, the whole illusion of your so-called personal, self-centered life, when you see this, the whole illusion collapses. And you will say right in the depths of your spirit, thank God. Thank God that a few months ago, a few years ago, at one point I said, I want to leave this island regardless of what it costs. And you find out something that's startling to you because you're so used to being betrayed by other people and by your own mind. You find out that truth and truth alone can be trusted. You know why? Because you're a different kind of a man now. You're a different kind of a woman now. And the first thing you'll say is, how on earth will I ever be able to explain what has happened? How can I explain it to my wife? She'll never get it. She doesn't want it. How can I explain it to my husband? All he is interested in is the racetrack. How can I ever get anything higher than the racetrack over to my husband? He's not interested. How can I tell my children how? They don't want it. That's not your concern. That's not your problem. You have found the pearl of great price, and you have fulfilled your spiritual aim in life, your spiritual destiny. There'll be so many, many experiences that will come to you once you're really walking in the light. But let me end with just this one. Ah, how beautiful. Never, never again will you ever be afraid of anyone or anything. Start tonight to take those first few steps away from your isolation, and truth will meet you and take you home where you belong. The road to reality runs through a very peculiar place. That peculiar place is called human nature. In order to find something higher than ourselves, than our present wretched little lives, in order to find something higher than what we are, we must first thoroughly understand what we are. Any human being who attempts to find God, reality, truth, without first finding himself will be A, deluded, B, sorrowful, C, a religious hypocrite, D, a very, very unpleasant human being. A human being so unpleasant that she can't bear living with herself. Now, it should have been made very clear by now that you must go against all your resistances to self-investigation, to self-knowledge. That you must make up your mind that you're going to follow the path all the way wherever it leads to you. And I want you to know that it's going to lead you into some very frightening places. You're already acquainted with them. You're already experiencing them. And these strange places that we're talking about, exist within your mind and within your total psychic system. They're called, these dark places, these strange places that you must pass through, go beyond. Now, if we had time for it, I could list perhaps about 5,000, but just a few samples so we'll understand what we're talking about. But ladies and gentlemen, you have to pass through that rocky road in human nature called loving self-hurt. Now, shall we pause just a little bit at that one? You must understand why you prefer to spend your day injuring yourself. Wouldn't you say you're hurting yourself when you close your eyes to the facts about yourself? That's a generalization. Let's get more specific. Wouldn't you say you're injuring yourself when you lose control of yourself? Wouldn't you say you are injuring yourself when you listen to this, when you submit to the tyranny of any human being or any organization? You'll agree that you're hurting yourself all right, but you don't know what to do about it, do you? You say the world is so overwhelming. Where does that overwhelming world exist? My poor deluded friends, you say it exists in that scowling husband, in that sarcastic wife, in those cruel parents, in that domineering boss. When you suffer from this world, where is the suffering? Where is this world of suffering you say you want to get rid of? It's you. And the last thing you want to do is get rid of yourself, which is the first thing you must do. Do you understand the kind of self I'm talking about? I'm talking about the self that imposes its own tyranny, fears, lies, hypocrisies, pains onto you, and you weakly submit to them. Let me tell you why. Let me tell you the greatest mistake of your life. Never mind that mistake you made when you were 18 or 20. Here's the greatest one. And today you can begin to understand it and get it out. The greatest mistake of any human being's life is that he has taken as his identity everything about him that is wrong. That's what you cling to, and this is why you won't investigate yourself to see where you're deluded, where you're lying to yourself, where you say you know God, and you don't. You won't investigate that for fear that you might have to give up something. The only thing you have to give up is what is tormenting you daily. And you're all living that way. Don't you sit there and tell me that you know what it's all about. You never have. Unless you listen to what I'm telling you today, you never will. You absolutely never will. You're going to knock your head against the brick wall and have a headache. But you're not going to be free. Aren't you delighted that in the first few minutes of this talk we have been so positive? Well, haven't I been? You have not heard a single falsehood in the first few minutes of this talk. You will never hear a single one till the end of this talk or anything that goes on in here. Therefore, isn't truth positive? The only positive factor in life. See, we're all so mixed up, so confused, so defensive, so egotistical, that we say, don't take away my present life. Don't you dare touch me. Have you ever noticed yourself doing that? Now, let me ask you a question. Why are you ever defensive about anything? Imagine a man, maybe a man owns a big forest, and in the forest are a bunch of vicious wolves. And he protects these wolves that maraud out and take his livestock and terrify him in general. And someone says, look, would you like me to chase these wolves out for you? I can do it. Just give me the word and I'll chase them out. And you say no. Because you are very much afraid that there is nothing else. Now listen to what I'm going to tell you right now. As simply as I can put it. There is something else for every one of you in this room besides living a life in which you fear the marauding wolves of your own nature. Now there's a way that can be accomplished. And you either follow that way or you don't accomplish it. You don't know from yourself how to do it. Don't you dare ever again lift a finger to find your own way, or you will end up tomorrow right where you are today. And on Friday you'll be like you were on Thursday and on through the week. See, listen. There's not two truths. There's not 5. There's not 1,000. There are 10,000 stupid religions, deceitful religions that tell people what they want to hear, religions and philosophies. There's one truth. Now, there is one truth. You either take that truth or you reject it, and don't you try to find a halfway spot. There is none. You either say, how foolish I have been, pretending that I have love in me, pretending that I have spiritual insight, pretending that I know what it's all about. How can an angry, defensive person know anything good? He can't, and you know it. Time to stop lying. So we're going to talk this afternoon about human nature and how we can go beyond it to a nature that is not this wretchedness, that is not filled with all these fears, with all these needs to try, listen to this please, with all these needs to try to explain away truth. You watch what happens to you when you leave this hall this afternoon. I'll tell you what's going to happen to you. This is to all of you to one degree or another. Some of you less, some of you more. Those of you who resist the truth, who would rather worship yourself than be in one with truth, you're going to argue, you're going to fight, and you're going to explain, and you are not going to succeed. Now, why am I saying this? Not to hurt your feelings or anything like that, but to give you the one chance you have. You have a marvelous chance for coming here this afternoon. It's not what you expected, maybe, some of you. It's not at all what you expected, and you should be so grateful for that. But so grateful that no one's going to deceive you and talk in generalities and tell you that you'll be all right if you just read a religious book, or if you meditate and you're not sure what that means, but you think it means bowing your head, akin to prayer, maybe something like that. Now, the lessons are everywhere. And let me give you a lesson I heard this morning. A number of us came down here from Boulder City, Nevada, where we have our headquarters. We're staying at the same motel. And I was outside this morning, just walking around a little bit. And there are some workmen outside doing a lot of work on the roof of the motel. And one lady, it was quite early in the morning, fairly early, and one lady apparently was disturbed by the sounds of the early workmen. It was about 8 o'clock. She should have been up by then anyway, huh? Some of our people had run across around the block 10 times by then. She yelled down something to the workman, and he politely, but very firmly, and I just happened to turn a corner and happened to hear this in time. He said, please, lady, we all have our problems. Don't give me yours. Are your problems so pressurizing you, so overwhelming you, that you're so eager to spill them off onto someone else? How many of you can't stop talking? How many of you can't stop chattering up here? How many of you bother other people, thinking that you're a blessing to their company? You see, where there's pain, there is pressure. Where there's pressure, there is a need to try to relieve it. Let me tell you what an intelligent human being is, even starting intelligence. Now, let me tell you what a stupid human being is first. A stupid human being is one who finds ways to release his tension all day long. By screaming out at somebody, by taking a drink, by engaging in violent behavior, whatever. That's a stupid human being whose pressure builds up and he doesn't know what to do with it, so he simply relieves it. And oh boy, I now feel better that I blasted the boss. See, he thinks he feels better. All he has is a temporary release of the tension that built up. Now there's a far better course, which is called getting rid of the pressure altogether. And in a very brief form, how you do that is to get rid of your ego self altogether. And oh boy, Are you going to fight that? First, the reason you fight it is because you don't understand it thoroughly. You think that the ego self by which you live has value to you. You think there's something good in it. This is because you're deceived into thinking that you are that angry person, are that conniving person who's going to outwit the world and make a lot of money. You think you are your own thoughts and feelings and actions, and you are not them at all. You have called yourself that. If you call yourself a telephone pole, it doesn't make you a telephone pole. Calling yourself a religious seeker doesn't make you a religious seeker. What it makes you is a person who's deceived himself into thinking he's a religious seeker so that he can hang on to his sickness, calling it health. And I am talking about practically every human being on earth. And you in your heart of hearts know it. If you could be real honest, if I were to ask you the following question, you'd be real honest. You'd know what you would answer, wouldn't you? And here's the question. Have you ever look, how old are you? 30, 60, 70, who knows? Have you ever in the course of your life met a sane human being? I'll tell you what you have met. You've met some very impressive charlatans. You've met some men who know how to wear suits and ties and comb their hair right and quote religious books and bow their heads and chant and have degrees on the wall, who instead of being sane or are terrified little kids. Aren't you aware of the drama that goes on in this world that is called reality? Practically every adult you know is a little 5-year-old girl, a little 5-year-old boy who wants candy, who wants comfort, who wants someone to help him, wants someone to help her, someone to look up to like Mama and Papa did years ago. You want to regress and go back? Please take a long leap with me right now in our thinking. It is entirely possible for every one of you here to have that kind of comfort and care and safety in the true way. Not in the way you're doing it now. You've been going at it all wrong. What you've been doing is trying to save yourself. And it hasn't worked, has it? You've never saved yourself from your headaches, from your nightmares, from your envy. You know how you are, men? You see that man with a pretty girl, and you're jealous of him, and you can't figure it out. You think you're better looking than he is, or nicer, and yet he has the pretty girl. And you can't figure out why life is so unjust. Both men and women have those sorts of rivalries, of foolishness, of childishness. Would you like to have something better than anything at all that this world has to offer? Well, now, that's kind of a difficult question because you don't know what it is that is higher than this world. So I'm going to use a few words to tell you, but you'll have to experience it to understand it. It's called reality. It's called truth. It's called union with something other than your present mechanical mind and emotions. It's called something that, please listen to this, it's called something that is authentically good and decent and innocent. Let me tell you a major problem you have. Maybe this will wake you up a little bit, and you must wake up. You're so unaware of yourselves, of your own human nature, which you must pass through, as we said earlier. You're so unaware of it, you don't know how you hurt everyone you meet. Your level hurts everyone you meet, and you haven't any idea what is happening. any more than you have any idea of what is happening when your own level injures you. It's so simple. Look at it. When you're in pain, what would you call that? Blessing yourself or hurting yourself? What would you call it? When you're worried about anything at all, the future. When you're worried about the future, would you call that being good to yourself or injuring yourself? You know very well what it is. You're wasting your energy and you're wasting your life. When you think about something about the past and you say, oh, if I'd only chosen a different man, you'd still be miserable, ladies. They're all alike, every single one of them. See how foolish you are thinking that man that you saw on that TV star. Do you read the newspapers and see what happens to those TV stars? How sick they are. How that their only consolation is drugs. I'll describe a typical situation. Speaking of TV and movie stars. I'm going to give you a plot of a movie, and you've seen it many times. A young lady, attractive young lady, answers an ad in the newspaper, and it says, secretary and bookkeeper wanted. So she phones, and she's invited out to a certain address to become secretary. I'm talking about how we get into the trap. Follow, please. So she drives on out, and it turns out into a country scene, and she goes way on out, and there's a big, dark mansion out there. So she drives up, a little bit frightened. She gets out of her car, and she looks up the vastness of it, and the vast estate, woods all around. But she needs money. She needs to earn a living. So she goes up and presses the doorbell, and there's always a wait. You know how they build up suspense? There's always a wait. And she looks around at the ivy coming down. Study movies. They give you a lot of information. Finally, someone comes to the door who's very stern and a little bit weird underneath it. And she's invited in and the head man, whoever he is, tells her what her duties are. Just take care of the books and take letters and so on. And the pay is very good. And so she's delighted. So she's accepted, and they get together that she's being hired as a secretary. Good, she goes to work. And she begins to understand where she is. She wanders around this big mansion, 70, 80 rooms, upstairs, downstairs, little towers up there. One afternoon, when she has nothing particular to do, she wanders down into the basement, lower floors. And you know, again, how it always is, she's curious. You know how it is. She's in movies, she knows. So she touches the door, and for some unaccountable reason, it swings open of itself. I never figured that out. How a heavy door could open when she just touched it with, but that's the way that works. So she goes in, and lo and behold, what's there but a scientific laboratory. See how the plot is thickening. She finally finds out that she's been employed by a mad scientist who's going to overtake the world, conquer the world with his little special scientific formulas that he's building there. And she sees other weird things. She begins to get scared at the situation she is in, just as you're scared at the situation you are in called life. And why don't you admit it? Just nod your head internally. I'm scared, you're terrified, and you know it. And I know it. Now she begins to think she'd better leave. So another afternoon, she very casually walks outside down the steps and starts walking toward the gate. And she sees a guard there, so she goes somewhere else, goes to the wall, and she sees a place where the wall is a little bit broken. She'll be able to go through it if she wants. So just as she's ready to go through, you following the plot? You've seen enough of them, haven't you? Another man comes along and he says, "Oh, miss, I don't think you want to go out there. That's a dangerous place." And the way he says it is enough to tell her, isn't it? So she caves in and starts to walk back. Now she knows that they know. that she's accidentally stumbled into the laboratory. So now she says her timidity, which was the starting emotion, has turned to great fear. And her only desire now is to get out of there. Let me pause a minute and tell you what a stupid woman would do. She'd say, "This is great, I think I'll join them. I'll let them know that I'm one of them." And she would destroy herself, because you know that the mad scientists always get destroyed in the end. But I'm serious about this, I'm not joking. So her terror builds, and she's nervous, and she plays little games with the people that are trying to find a way out. Now she's afraid of her life, her very life, just as you are, aren't you? Let me tell you why you're afraid of your life, because you've got a false life, and there's something very deep inside of you that tells you that the time life does come to an end. But something called eternal life doesn't come to an end. You see, you're not going to be 40 all the time, and you're not going to have all these marvelous memories all the time, and you're afraid of them coming to an end because you have identified with them and called them you. Of course you're afraid of losing your life, as the young lady was. After 2 weeks of terror, in which the director and the writer all get together to make it as horrible as possible, she remembers something. She remembers that she had read something years ago about all the old mansions in the area, in the big country where she lived. She remembered something. She remembered that when they were constructed a couple hundred years ago, solid, the way they built them then, solid bricks, rocks. She remembered that every mansion like that had a secret exit that ran somewhere inside the house, down and underground, outside, a mile away. So now she has to find it. It's a pretty big place, pretty scary place. She doesn't know where to look, and she's afraid to go into some of those rooms for fear of what she might find. Am I describing it? Are you getting the connection? You're afraid to go into those rooms, aren't you? I'll tell you where you'll find the exit, the passage, the secret way out of your problem. You'll find it after the very last terrifying room you investigate. When you are thoroughly exhausted, your study of your own mind, of your own reactions, of what you say, of why you say it, of your motives, your tricky little motives, and aren't they tricky? Have you ever noticed yourself saying one thing and meaning another? That's what we're talking about. That's a room. I said there are less than 100 rooms in this mansion. There are thousands of rooms unvisited as yet in us. Well, the young lady did what was necessary. There's only one way out, and she knew that, and she found it. She went through the whole mansion, through the scary attics where the bats were, and down in the cellar where it was dark and mysterious. And after the last room, she found the secret passage that led out, and she walked to freedom, and no one could stop her. Do you know what you're doing? You're attributing power and strength and threats to what is inside of you, and I'm telling you, when you know the secret passage, you walk out effortlessly. The whole bundle of bluffs and hoaxes and anxieties that you have, they all vanish. You're walking out. There they are up there. How can they touch you anymore? You walk out and you're on the outside, and there they are in back of you. I'm describing a very real state to you. I'm using a bit of a fiction story to tell you, to give you a parallel into what can happen to you if you start doing what is right for you. And what is right for you is wrong for for your old nature, and let me urge you to make it as wrong as possible. Don't you spare yourself anymore. Don't you be weak anymore. Don't you ever again cringe before what you see in those unvisited rooms inside yourself. Or, if you have to cringe, if you have to shake, if you have to be tremble, then open the door and go in there trembling. The beauty of finding the way out is that you don't have to have any strength. Isn't that good? Because you don't have any. It matches. You don't have to have any courage. You don't have to have any wisdom because you don't have any wisdom. You don't. What you have is a big bluff. What you have is anger when someone tells you you have no intelligence. Now, is anger stupid or intelligent? You know very well what it is. Anger and resistance and hostility against truth is simply an attempt to keep yourself enthroned as your own God. Egotism calling itself God. And that, ladies and gentlemen, egotism is the same thing as hell. Now, would you care to describe to yourself where you live internally? Shall we put it very, very politely and say, it isn't heaven? Shall we say that it's a pretty dreadful place to live? Now look, don't you fall into belief, into what I'm talking about. You've tried that too. You've tried believing, and look where it's led to you. Led you to. Instead of believing, experiment. Act. Try sometime doing what you're told to do by someone, something who knows what it's talking about. And I'm talking about truth itself. See? From the very first of this talk here today, every single one of you in this room, every one of you without exception, sensed that you were being told the truth. You know very well that it's the way out. You know it. Now, what are you going to do with that? Are you going to be so idiotic as to reject it so that you can call yourself knowledgeable, wise, and fall downhill further? Please listen to what I'm going to say. This will help you make a right decision. You think that something bad will happen to you if you give up your present life, your life of anger, of self-injury, self-torment. In your wrong thinking, you think that something bad will happen to you, and the bad thing that will happen, you think, is the disappearance of yourself. But you are not that self that you fear the disappearance of. You are not that at all. You're not your thoughts. You're not your experiences. You're not your hopes. You're not your ambitions. You are none of these things. What you are is something that is, for now, understand it like this. Then you can go further. What you are is something that is none of these things. What you are is something utterly unlike the past that is built up and which you have identified with and called yourself. Now, I am sitting here right now telling you the absolute truth. Everything you've heard has been a fact. So I will try it once more to solidify the point. I am telling you, ladies and gentlemen, that it is a fact, it is a truth that you will have something utterly different, utterly, for the first time, good for you, if you follow the facts, the truth that you've heard this afternoon. I'll try it again. Because I know, I understand what's happening right now, right exactly at this minute. I know what's going on in the minds of every one of you in this room. Because I know how wolves must react. They must react like wolves, and they don't want the light. Wolves want to be in caves. We're going against the wolves, the inner wolves. I'm telling you that if you follow, practice, experience, no matter how many times you blunder, make mistakes, you will eventually see for yourself, from your own nature, that it was good for you to obey truth instead of sneer at it. And heaven help any of you in this room who sneers at what you heard here today. You're going to be your own punishment. And I wouldn't be you for $1 billion. Now that takes care of you. How about others? If you're tired of lying, tired of being defeated, then just give up. And someday you will do something you've never been able to do before, which is to smile spontaneously, cheerfully, happily at what you've discovered, what has come to you. And you'll take a deep breath and you'll say, thank God I didn't listen to my own lies. And you'll know why you're thanking God. Because now you know that you're in this different state. You're not thinking it. That again would be thinking. That again would be self-centered deception masquerading as God. Because you are now absent, truth is there. And there is someone there who understands all this. This is what is known as having a new nature. And it can be yours. Something is certainly knocking us around. I wonder what it could be. Maybe it is something that is so close, so intimate, so personal that we can't see it. Do you suppose that this force that you call an enemy and therefore create it as an enemy, do you suppose that this force might be something so very, very close to us that we don't want to see it at all? You now have enough to take home and think about for a month. If you want to. You know, the closer you get to home, the closer you get to where people are hiding something, the more frightened they become. The more resistance builds up in them. And they react the exact opposite way which they should do if they had 1 ounce of sense. Let's try it again. Something is wrecking your life. Well, something is, because your life is a wreck. You know that. Who are you trying to kid? You live with yourself. You're very close to that person, aren't you? What went wrong? What's going wrong? I'll tell you what it is. Right at the start, I'm going to tell you what your whole problem is. You haven't learned to tell the truth. Society told you when you were a little girl, a little boy, that the way to get along in this life was to lie. To lie about everything. And so you started to lie. We all started to lie. And that's what we were told to do. And little children are very impressionable. They'll do anything you tell them to do. And so your parents and your loving friends and your relatives, by their very self-defeat in life, by their misery, by their choice to stay asleep, by their example, they told you and they told me how to live. And we started to follow their example of destruction, didn't we? It didn't take any of us coming into this world very long to learn how to be unhappy, did it? Remember in grade school, grammar school, how it started? The competition for grades, the competition for honors, athletic honors. The pain started to build, didn't it? But one thing did not accompany the pain, and that was the information, the knowledge, the how-to of how to get rid of the pain. So we started to develop lopsided. The confusion and the hiding and the lying, the self-deception started to build. But none of those people out there, not one of them, had the decency or the goodness or the knowledge to tell us how to get rid of the pain and start living a pain-free life. Right? We've reached a pretty horrible conclusion already, which is that nobody knows. Nobody knows who's kicking us around. Nobody knows how to tell us how we can stop getting kicked around. Nobody knows. When you get to be about 20 maybe, earlier, a little later, you settled in your mind that very fact. You looked around, didn't you? You read a lot of books. And you got married. That was supposed to be one of the answers. Your pain will go away if you got married. Instead it doubled, right? And the children came along. And all the harpies started hovering around giving you stupid advice. And you didn't know any better, and so you listened to them. It's a wonder that every human being on earth isn't in a lunatic asylum. How do we manage to escape? How do we manage to stay out? You've asked yourself that occasionally, haven't you, in your secret thinking? Now, ladies and gentlemen, I have the most marvelous news of all time for you. For those of you who want it, and don't kid me, don't you tell me just by being here that you want it. Don't you tell me just because you came to this room that you want to change. You see, you may be so hardened that you don't know you're hardened, and so you're going to resist the solution, which you'll hear later tonight. So please, don't make any assumptions at all about your receptivity, about your wish to change. As a matter of fact, I want you to be very cautious, very suspicious, that there may be resistances in you that you haven't the slightest notion about, because they are there. See, when you start hearing the truth, as you're hearing tonight, and you're going to hear the pure truth, you won't be lied to anymore right here. When you start being told the truth, the old nature starts getting a little bit worried that you're going to dislodge it from your life. And it will start to lie to you and tell you all sorts of reasons why you shouldn't listen to what you're hearing. And if you are stupid enough to listen, then you have asked for the future years of misery that you will experience as a result of rejecting truth. and accepting pain as a normal, natural, necessary way of life. Something occurred to me I'm going to do tonight I haven't done before. Just occurred to me. I think I'll go ahead with it. I'm going to tell you a little bit about audiences. You find it interesting, and also very much in line with what we're talking about. You can take any audience, such as one here, and you can take the first 5%. You can divide it into three classifications: 5%, 5%, and 90%. The first 5% are the few people who are sufficiently tired of lying and of being lied to. People who are really sincere about changing themselves, about wanting something different, who are not in love with their own hidden hatreds, with their own hidden violence. People who are tired of being sick. Now these are what you commonly call receptive people. People who want to hear. People who don't come to a meeting like this to cause trouble or to argue with themselves or to argue at all. But they say, please, sir, if there is a way out, I want to hear about it. Please tell me about it. That's 5%. These are your people who can learn. These are the people who can change. At the other extreme, the other 5% down at the bottom are your super sickies, your weirdos, your insane people. People who are thoroughly hardened in evil. People who will never change. People who have made up their minds to live in the hell of their own nature for the rest of their lives. We've got 90% left. Somewhere between these two are the other 90%. Can you examine yourself right as you're seated here tonight? And be very honest about it. This is very helpful if you can be honest about it and ask yourself where you belong in these three classifications. There's hope for the 80%. There's hope for the 5% at the top. There's no hope for the other 5%. I know that. And in here, audience like this, you know who you are, and I know who you are. All right, let's go back. Here's a man, he's seated at home, and he's reading a newspaper. And he sees in the paper that there's a best-selling author, his new book has come out. And he gets all excited. He says, wow, here's this man, he's getting rich and he's getting famous over writing a book. That's what I want. I'm going to do the same thing. Follow this story. This is all about spiritual development, as you'll see. So he gets all excited about becoming a best-selling author. And have you ever had that? Ever wanted to write a book, write a poem? You didn't want to show it to anyone, right? So several nights a week for 2 or 3 months, he sits down on the typewriter and he knocks out a book. And he's all excited as all new authors are. This is going to be the next Gone with the Wind. And they're going to make a movie out of it, and it's going to go into paperback, and I'm going to be rich and famous. So he finishes the book with about 50,000 words, which is generally about the minimum number of words for any kind of a book, 50,000 words. And he sends it off to a publisher. And would you like to guess what happens? One day the mailman with a bent over back comes over with the load of the manuscript and puts it on his front door, rejected by the publisher. Well, this is the first time. He just doesn't feel too bad about it. So he says, well, I'll write another book. So he sits down and writes another book, sends it off, comes back. He says, well, try it again. So he writes a third book, comes back, fourth and fifth. I'm talking right now. I'll interrupt the story to tell you what the point we've reached. You remember all those plans you have for becoming rich and famous? Remember all those ambitions you have to have it made, to be happy, to be free, to feel secure, as if anything you could do could make you secure. What is the source? When insecurity tries to feel secure, it just shakes in insecurity. Isn't that perfect logic? Now, aren't you going to give up from now on trying to be secure in the ways you've been doing, getting married, getting unmarried? After about the 10th manuscript, our would-be author begins to get a little hard. He gets to get a little bitter, and he begins to feel kicked around by life. I've spent all this time at night after working hard driving a truck. I spent all this time writing a book, and nobody wants it. Nobody appreciates it. He begins to blame the exterior world for the rejection of his manuscripts. This goes on and on and on until he's written 25 manuscripts, and all of them come back with rejection slips inside. He's beginning to get paranoid. He's beginning to think the world doesn't appreciate his great creative efforts. And he says, what is wrong with those people out there that they don't want my book? One day he meets a professional writer, and he envies him, of course. A man who's actually a mixed man who's actually had books published, and they've sold well, and he's made some money at it. So he says to the professional author, I wonder what's the difference between you and me? I can't figure it out. I've had these books published, and he starts telling the professional about it. And the professional says, well, look, we have a little writers club down, meets once a week. If you want to come down, bring your manuscript, come on down, and we'll look it over. That's what we do down there. We criticize manuscripts. If you can take it, you'll make it. So the man says, fine. He's a little scared. This is the first time he has ever exposed a manuscript to outside criticism. Up till now, he's been the only one to look at it, and can you believe that everything he saw was marvelous about it? Now, we wouldn't call that biased, would we? So he takes the manuscript down to the Writers Club. Oh, and have any of you ever tried to write and taken it down to a Writers Club? Let me tell you, it's a pretty horrible experience. So he took it down and passed it around, as they do at these. I know I've been to hundreds of them myself, speaking personally, in past years. And they started criticizing it. And the first critic, they usually meet in a home, the first critic said, what are you talking about scientific farming in Albania when you don't know anything about it? Can you imagine a book about scientific farming in Albania? That's the subject he chose because, he thought people would be interested in that. They're really not. And so the critic said, the first correction I would give you is for you to write about something you know about. Everybody knows something about something. So you might write about something that's familiar with you, to you. Manuscript goes to the next critic. And this happens to be an English teacher, and she looks aghast at the grammar. You don't use double negatives, sir. You don't write a paragraph 300 words long without coming to a sentence, a period. And she tears into the grammar and the English. And all the time he's growing whiter and stiffer and more nervous. On down the line, the others criticize his manuscript. He takes it, takes the criticism mentally and goes home. He's at a critical point in his life, isn't he? As a writer, as a professional writer. He can do one of two things. He can take it. He can see how wrong he has always been about his writing. He can say, that's a fact. There's one sentence there with 250 words without a single comma or period in it. And I was trying to sell that to a publisher. They're not as stupid as I thought they were. He can accept the criticism. He can learn how to become a professional writer, or he can close up and go into hatred and say, I am right and the rest of the entire world is wrong. Let me ask you something. Did it ever occur to you that you have to learn how to live? When we come into this world, we're given a junk pile called a mind. And we're expected to take something with it and make something. You have the raw materials for it. But it's all mixed up. Now, back to the question. Did it ever occur to you that you were supposed to do something with your mind after you come into this world, that it's not handed to you? Well, you weren't born happy, were you? You bawled when you were born. You cried. And you've cried ever since, haven't you? And you've got your feelings hurt. And you can't figure out why everyone out there wants to criticize you. One reason they criticize you is because there's something wrong with you. Now, a person with even an ounce of intelligence could be able to figure out, as that writer did, and maybe there is something wrong with the manuscript, the man finally said. Let's make this a happy ending with him, all right? There's enough misery in this world, and if you don't change, you're going to continue to experience it. He listened to the criticism. He went back for more. He was a very rare man. He said, the only way I can learn is to get the nonsense jolted out of me. So he went back, and they found dozens of other things wrong with his material, with his manuscript. He unconsciously plagiarized, for example, and he didn't even know it. He read an encyclopedia, and he liked the way that writer phrased it, so he simply copied it. Pretty soon, the authors of his book he saw was Winston Churchill and Franklin Roosevelt and Ernest Hemingway, everyone that he had unconsciously lifted from. He learned his craft, and he learned to write. He learned to write well. Now, that's the end of the illustration. As shocking as it might be to any human being, you have to learn how to live honestly, how to live happily, how to live in inner freedom. It is not handed to you. If it was handed to any of us, we wouldn't be such raving idiots as we are today. Well, that's not a bad description, is it? You rave like idiots in your mind, don't you? And you're glad nobody can see the horror show in your mind and in your feelings. Don't be ashamed of it. Simply know it's there, like the writer did. Know that something is severely wrong. You want to know how to be happy? Be a free human being.